Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wired Special Election episode. Today, we are covering the results of the most recent elections. As you know, Rumen Radev's party, Progressive Bulgaria, has won by a landslide with 131 guaranteed parliamentary seats. This is an unprecedented situation that we haven't seen since 1997. Joining us today in the studio to discuss it is political science professor Branimir Stanimirov. Thank you for joining us, Professor.
Thank you for having me again.
First of all, Professor, I want to ask you why you think Radev won by such a landslide. What attracted voters to him?
Well, there are a number of factors that contributed to Radev's electoral victory. So, first of all, he positioned himself in a way in the center, in the political center. The other reason was that he was really a mystery for most of the voters. So he didn't take very radical positions on, the axis left, right, liberal, conservative, and it allowed many voters to support him.
And zooming in on our generation, Gen Z, results from Alpha Research show that over 40% of young voters chose him. Why do you think that is? Is that surprising to you?
I wouldn't say that I'm that surprised. I don't believe that the Gen Z, your generation, is that much radically different from the overall electoral body of Bulgaria. Many young people were dissatisfied also with the kind of more liberal position to Radev and did not support these parties. And Radev seemed to be a good alternative for also young voters.
So, is it fair to say that Radev capitalized on the protest wave from last year?
Yes, I believe that's accurate. He um, reaped most of the gains from the protest movement, even though, again, many of the representatives of PPDB kind of participate in the process. In the protests, it seems that Radev was the one that benefited the most from this movement and capitalized on the dissatisfaction, the frustration that had accumulated in the Bulgarian citizenry.
But we continue to change. The PPDB seemed to be the central actor in that anti-corruption movement. How do you think that the center shifted to Radev?
Uh, the same situation happened a couple of times in the previous years. So, first couple of years ago, Slavi Trifonov's party, in a very similar vein, um, reaped the benefits of a protest that was organized by someone else. So basically, it happens often in Bulgarian public space. So one party organizes the protests and is leading this movement, but at the end, there is another actor that reaps the gains, um, takes advantage of the situation, and um, this is just what it is. Basically, the party that did not participate in the party political life of the country um, had the managed to again to win big to use this advantage.
Look, how do you think that that happened in this case?
Uh, First, it's very important to mention that even though Radev has been the president for 9 years, he was perceived as someone who did not participate in politics. He himself, in one of the first interviews, said, "I'm entering now into politics," which was very funny in a way because he was the president for 9 years of the country, and I consider that to be a political post in the country. But at the same time, he was perceived in the Bulgarian public space as someone who was not really part of the mainstream parties, part of the status quo, some external actor that can change the system. So I believe that was important factor that allowed Progressive Bulgaria, Radev's party, to um, win so much of the voters turnout.
Why do you think people perceive him as a new political actor, even though he has been a central figure for so long?
Uh, I believe this is the case because the presidency, so the position of the president allowed Radev to attack, to criticize all the political parties, take positions mm, that were against the negative, the problematic policies adopted by most of the Bulgarian political parties. And at the same time, okay, he was also criticized for some of his caretaker governments, for some of his positions, but at the end, uh, he did not directly participate in the governing of the country. So this allowed him to accumulate significant, let's say, popularity and um, yeah, political capital.
I understand. But yeah, now Radev has the parliamentary majority, which means that he can become prime minister without having to negotiate a coalition with any other parties. And this is a new situation. It happened for the first time in almost 30 years. Is that good or bad? What do you think?
It could be both good and bad. So the problem is that indeed it's only a very few times in the most recent political history of the country someone received such a won such a landslide victory, had such a popularity. Um, Again, Radev remains a huge mystery. We don't really know in which direction he's gonna head, what type of policy his government will undertake. There's certain risks and dangers there, but also there might be some positive developments. We will see now what his policies will be. He didn't take, let's say, very concrete positions for most of the important issues in Bulgarian public space related to Bulgaria's concrete positions within the institutional framework of the European Union and so on. So this allowed him to win on the parliamentary elections, but governing the country is something different, and now his party will have to do difficult choices.
Yeah, speaking of the choices that he would have to make, a lot of people are concerned that he might distance Bulgaria from the European Union. Do you think Bulgaria's membership in the EU and the Eurozone is at risk?
I wouldn't use this formulation. I don't think that the Bulgaria's membership in NATO, in the EU, and the eurozone is at risk. I don't think Radev would undertake such a dramatic, radical shifts, changing the geopolitical stance and positioning of the country. Yet he himself said in some of the first statements that he made that he would be taking pragmatic actions and critical thinking he mentioned. So that means that he would, let's say, have a position that differs from some of the typical EU positions related to the war in Ukraine, for instance, and probably align himself with people like Babiš and Robert Fico in Slovakia. So that might be example for him, since these are two the countries that he mentioned himself.
Yeah, speaking, as you mentioned, the war in Ukraine, another concern is definitely his foreign policy. He has expressed or been perceived to express some pro Russian narratives. To what extent should we expect Bulgaria to get closer to Russia?
To some, uh, I believe personally that Radev would make some steps, some attempts to improve bilaterally Bulgaria's attitudes, relations with Russia, but at the same time, I don't believe that he would radical departure from the European position. And uh, what what we will see, I believe, most probably would be classical, typical a balancing act that Balkan leaders often undertake. It's only typical for Balkan countries to try to have a balancing position between kind of the, let's say, the European Brussels position, the German position most prominently, and the Russian one. So definitely he would try to improve relations with Russia, but for the time being, based on the information we have, I don't believe he would try to make very sudden, dramatic shifts in the geopolitical orientation of the country.
And what do you think really motivates him to, or demotivates him to undertake such radical actions?
Well, for sure, the fact that many of the people that supported the Возрожденный party, the Revival party, and the Bulgarian Socialist Party this time voted for Radev would make him willing to improve relations with Russia. His own political beliefs seem to be kind of slightly sympathetic to Russian positions. Uh, Representatives of the Russian state already congratulated him, which is also a sign, kind of marked the fact that they congratulate him and they approve of some of his positions. Mm, so his electoral base, the fact that his electoral base is sympathetic to Russia might be one of the factors that would push him toward having a slightly friendlier attitude and stance toward the Russian Federation.
And now let's talk about some other expectations from him. He has important tasks at hand, namely a new budget and judicial reform that he promised, for example. What can we expect for him?
New political parties always undertake reforms in the first couple of months. Having such an important legitimacy in Bulgarian politics would definitely mean that he would try to, in the first couple of months of his government, to undertake the most drastic, serious overhauls of the constitution if he decides to do a constitutional reform. So we expect in the first couple of months of his rule significant reforms, significant shifts in the institutional setting of the country. Um, Now, to what extent this, how much he would try to overhaul, for instance, the constitution, how much he would change the law on the judiciary, and in which direction remains to be seen. But it's very telling that already today the prosecutor general of Bulgaria resigned.
Yeah, and about that, as we are recording on the day when Chief Prosecutor Borislav Sarafov has resigned, what do we expect next to happen?
I'm the fact that this resignation happened so suddenly and so quickly after the huge electoral victory of Radev is very telling for me. I believe that this means that there might be some type of deal within this what is called in the literature illiberal network configurations of in the public space of the country. So it's very probable that Sarafov was actually waiting for the results of the elections, and then having seen that there is a new, obviously, leader in Bulgarian politics, his decision was to resign, or maybe there was already a deal made.
Yes, you're right. So, what would you say that says about our judicial system for the chief prosecutor to wait for the results of the elections in order to resign?
Unfortunately, these are not good news for the way the Bulgarian judiciary operates. Obviously, it's very telling that the judicial elite is linked to key economic interests and key political players and doesn't really operate in an independent way. We basically need to see, so the prosecution would need to see the elections and then the prosecutor general to resign. It's obviously not something that the judiciary and the prosecution, the state prosecution, would be concerned with in a normally functioning democracy. So the Bulgarian case, as I said in the previous interview, remains one of state capture in which illegitimate network configurations of media moguls, big businesses, politicians operate together in conjunction, uh, capturing the state and key institutions of the state. And unfortunately, this sudden resignation signals that the illegitimate actors in the Bulgarian public space just convert it, and the model persists. Only there is new political party in play and new face of the regime, but we still don't see any signs that the old model, the political model of state capture, is gone.
And do you think that this promised reform is going to address appropriately this systemic issue in the system, or is there some grander action that needs to be taken?
It remains to be seen. Obviously, the hope of most of the Bulgarian voters was that Radev would undertake steps to dismantle the corrupt model, the model of state capture spread in the country. But so far, it's difficult. Until this point, it's difficult to make a judgment of the extent to which Radev would undertake a serious democratic institutional overhaul of the system, or he's just going to continue with the previous model.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Thank
And
you for
with
having
that, we will conclude today's episode of The Wired. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at The Wired AUBG and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more news coverage on everything that matters. News made for students by students. Stay tuned, and until next time.
Great job. Really nice. Both of you. Actually. This was very interesting.
Are we good with the time? Because, like, I